Okay, well, the presentation is coming. I'll start introducing myself. So I'm a restoration architect from Riga, working already for 30 years with historic buildings. So my topic will be not so wide as not so wide as Andros. So I won't be talking about city scale. I'll be talking about architectural praxis and about the influence on city, not from above, not from political level, but from separate building, separate object level. So the question which I put on screen is how preservation of historic sites can contribute to sustainable development. So that's what I'll be talking. So the first thing what I would like to point out is difference between how historic buildings live and how historic buildings, how their ecology is made, to compare it with modern buildings. And on the left is how it was, how it's nowadays. On the right is how it's today. No, so how it was before. So basically, it was the buildings were breathing, what's called breathing. So it means that they put some moisture into them, and allowed the drafts which were mentioned. They allowed the building to ventilate, and naturally for the water to evaporate. And so everything was untight. So the moisture was left in the buildings, and it could leave it safely. Nowadays, we are putting everywhere kind of insulation, dense windows, all types of plastic films, which don't allow the buildings to breathe. So it's a totally different story also about heating, also about how we maintain the buildings and how we make them live. Another aspect is on legislation in Latvia. So we have this one main document, which is building law, according to which all the buildings are built and rebuilt and preserved. And what I have pointed out in orange color is that the preservation of one of the tasks or aims of this law is to preserve and to preserve cultural historical values. The other document is strictly on historic buildings, on those historic values. So and it also says what is cultural historic value. So it's assessment of this monument. Basically, it's a sum of different aspects which we all find in historic buildings: historical, scientific, cultural, and so on values. And the third law, which I would like to put this fragment on screen, is low energy efficiency of buildings. And what is told that actually cultural monuments are not obliged to upgrade, to be upgraded if it threatens the preservation of these buildings. So basically, they have like somewhere lighter life, let's say in energy saving. So you can upgrade them, but you can also, if it's difficult, so you can omit that obligation. Nevertheless, the buildings which are historic buildings, but which are which let's say have applied for some funding from European Union, they still need to have this energy efficiency assessment, what's called. And one example is for historic wooden manor house dating from 1930s. And they also had to fulfill this table, which is in Latvian, but basically probably know about this. It's about heating, about hot water, and so on. Mechanical ventilation. There are quite a lot of zeros, which means that it cannot be assessed because this historic building simply doesn't have. And the guy who did this assessment, he stopped on lighting. So the basic gain from this energy efficiency assessment was that you need to change bulbs from one type to another, and then get some figures which allowed the building to be theoretically more energy efficiency. Everybody understands it's kind of weird, but that's how it's done. Yeah. Well, there have been several research and recommendations. One project on the right, which was Suhito, I was also part of that some 10 years ago. It was called, and it was on energy efficiency of historic towns and cities. And there were quite good recommendations from that, which came out. Also, there was Cool Brick Project, policy paper, which also deals with historic building difference from modern buildings. And also in Latvia, the National Heritage Board has issued such recommendations for improvement of historic building energy efficiency, which doesn't deal with lamps, but it deals with real stuff. There have been in England, historic England, recommendations on main aspects of historic buildings, and also improving thermal efficiency of separate parts which are most vulnerable for and which are more effective. Historic versus modern development. If you look back in history, the materials which were used for buildings were sustainable. They were locally produced. They were processed on site, like lime or so. Relatively low energy consumption, and they were using material properties very efficiently. To compare with modern construction, where we have complex technological solutions, advanced logistics, so we carry materials all over the world, from China for Asia, whatever, and materials and processes are very energy intensive. So it's quite different than it used to be, let's say, 100 years ago. And also not only about producing a building, but also about the materials as such. So there was a case in Riga. There was an idea to demolish this 6 or 7-story building in the center, and one of the aspects for not demolishing it was reuse of building materials, because it's made of concrete, of solid material. And you might imagine the pile of materials which could come out of that when you demolish that. If you compare with, let's say, traditional construction, which is made of wood, which is easily transferable and degradable and so on. And historic development, of course, has its own distribution of heat, and basically it's habitability, or place where people, you need warmth where people are. So let's say in case of a church, you need warmth where people are sitting. Let's say in this room, we also would need heat here and not all over the space. And it also affects, and it shows out through. You have this heat space, and you have the envelope of the building, which transfers the heat differently. So there's rough estimation how many energy you lose through which part of the building, and one of course of this is through the ceiling, through the upper roof, and also through the windows, and the rest is so. So here comes some operational energy. So what can be reduced for operational, meaning the energy needed for building to be operated. And so the sequence of applying different thermal operating is obviously from places where it has less impact on buildings. So it's ceiling, which you can easily insulate, like this case in a church. Or there can be something done with the windows. It's Latvian National Art Museum windows, which have been upgraded on the inner panes. We changed the energy efficiency glass. What has been done historically, you also saw in the pictures. It had been shutters. It's very simply, easily. And Dr. Paul Baker in Glasgow University has done this small slide on this. So how easily windows energy efficiency can be updated just by putting curtains inside or by closing with shutters. So it's like double leveling up this insulation. Also, not only against cold, but also against heat, excess warming. Here's an example from the same National Art Museum, where you can see skylights which have been put on south side. It's in 1905. It's more than 100 years ago. And what they did, they simply put blinds inside and got a very effective way how to ensure light, diffuse light, but also to eliminate excess heat, which you get by sun, obviously, in Latvia. So differences are in thermal mass, in moisture control, and passive cooling and heating, and also renovating historic systems, and the same blinds, which if you look at the beginning of 20th century pictures, you see quite a lot those shades which are along the windows, which there is none of that right now in Riga, because everyone has put those blocks outside and cooling units. Another transportation energy, so it's well of transportation. It's people who are moving, who can move around historic cities because they're rather dense with small scale. I was actually very pleasantly surprised today. I came from the airport here, but you can walk. It's within walking distance. You cannot walk in Riga to the airport, but you can walk, and it was a really nice walk. Yeah, so it's easily accessible, and it's also part of the energy efficiency of historic development. So if you put this all together, so it's embedded energy. So it's energy which is embedded in the buildings, and as Ave mentioned. Historic buildings are sky high in this level of embodied energy, because people has already used energy to build them, and the subrenting is a small part of that. And then operating energy, which you can reduce by modernizing heating systems and so, but also improving the way how buildings are used. And transportation energy is the third one, which I already mentioned. And if you look at the mentioned life cycle of historic buildings, so at one point the building is made, it's from cradle, then you get this building is built and it's usable, and with time it degrades, and then it comes to some point when either it goes down to this death or the grave, or at this point we can take some actions which we know how to do. We can do some reconstruction, restoration, and all other reuse and so, and make the buildings continue to live, and make buildings sustain. So and some conclusions. So one thing is this methodology which has been used for assessment of buildings in general, energy efficiency. It should be different for historic buildings, and there's still some road to go into this. It will take into account all those aspects which we discussed. The solution for increasing should be chosen gradually. So it's a place where people habitate. So should be where they're less intrusive, less visible, less costly, and then you can go to some high technology upgrading. And the third is one of the most effective ways is to replace engineering systems, which are usually in historic towns are in very bad condition, but which can do good improvement. So basically that's it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you stay on the stage? I would like to ask also Andru here, because you, as one former president of Estonian Architects Association and Latvian president of association, I would like to ask from you, what is the matter with architects? Very shortly, what is the problem with architects? They don't do these old buildings, they don't do the right things. Why they don't do? Why don't they fix panel houses? So do you see some contradiction or problem with having a large-scale questions, programs, and we still don't see big change? Just free commentary of what you feel of architects' side.
Yeah, well, I'm now in this position that I have to protect architects.
Yes.
Yes. Well, actually, the thing is that I would say that architects love to work with this topic, especially if it's linked to our heritage. Because, like, the building what I showed, this city theater here in Tallinn, then I would say all those big factory buildings here in Tallinn, which are being transformed into some new, I don't know, concert halls, conference centers, apartment buildings, so on. This is something that intrigues architects, and we always like to work with this historical legacy. Well, I've also been involved with the city theater, but also with different school buildings, which are under the protection, and the extension is a new, and they have a new extension. But I would say that the problem is actually with this Soviet legacy, those big apartment building areas. Those doesn't intrigue architects, and this is a problem, I would say, because we have to actually like people who live there, they deserve also better this kind of living environment, and I would say that it's quite sad how those buildings are being renovated. Just this cheap insulation and plaster, and that's it. That we don't try to kind of make a new surrounding. I know that there is one this pilot project here in Tallinn with one kind of quarter of Soviet apartment buildings, and we really hope that this project will succeed, and we won't have just insulated buildings, but also the new kind of city space around it. And I hope that through these projects we can kind of make it more attractive to talented and good architects as well.
Okay, same question
Okay.
to you.
Yeah, I'll try to answer. So as I'm coming from heritage sector, I've always been working with historic buildings, and it has been normal for me to repair and to restore them. Not so much thinking about maybe energy efficiency originally, but just making them live longer. But for colleagues which are I would say that the architects, at least in Latvia, are getting better and better with each year, with each month, maybe even. Because it has become prestigious to work with historic buildings, because let's say colleagues from previous generations, they mostly they were taught to design new buildings and make shapes, and even city planning was much more about shapes and about silhouettes and so, and not so much about people and living within them. Right now, they're taking we are taking much more this into consideration, was the heritage aspect, and also this aspect of renovation of buildings. So I think we just need a bit more time, and it'll be very good with architects. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then maybe I will ask from Robin Pender. You are the scientist. Do you see the missing link of science to the action, who is really drawing things or making this drawing? Yeah.
Well, I think I first got to stop my jaw dropping, because that isn't how it is in the UK. Yeah, it's not prestigious at all to work even on a cathedral. That's not what, we've got the Norman Fosters and that's still what prestige looks like. So I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm envious, this is wonderful. We've discussed this. I've been in working groups with the RIBA and so forth, and with the AIA in America as well. And I think that it's to do with training, that if you're not taught that water hits buildings, if that's not where you start. And, I ran away after 6 months of architecture and went off and did physics because I was being asked to design before, I was asked to run before I could walk, because I was being asked to be creative and design buildings without knowing what a building, how it was meant to work, how it was meant to stand up, how materials worked together. They talked about brick walls without talking about bonding. And so I think that there is a really deep, it's in engineers as well, that there's a deep science, that's a fundamental science that's missing, that would get to a better way of building and of appreciating old buildings. But I'm still feeling envious.
Well, maybe the reason why it's here a bit different is that this those historical buildings, they are always unique. But we are coming from this Soviet era when we had this mass production, and so they built those huge apartment building areas. So and all the houses basically look the same, and so. Everyone wants to be kind of a bit different. We are individuals. And so maybe that's why we appreciate more this heritage, because the rest of it, it's quite dull. Ugly. Well, I wouldn't say ugly, but grey maybe.
Oh, that's such a good observation.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I just thought about it right now, so I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
And also this creativity which you mentioned, the renovation of historic buildings even asks for demands more creativity to solve different issues, because you have some existing things which you need to which you cannot avoid. Yeah? So you need to adopt things. Yeah? So that's also kind of puzzle making.
I completely agree with you. And if you go to somewhere like the art schools, like the Slade, they'll always say, fight yourself out of a corner, get constraints, and you get more creative. But I don't think that's what's generally taught, at least in the UK and in Belgium and so forth, where I also know, or Australia. It tends to be strip back. It's not fair to be constrained by anything that's there. Your creativity can only explode if you have the blank slate. So is there a psychology thing here? I'm feeling very envious. I can't tell you. I think there's something here that you guys need to be teaching us.
So maybe you have some comments. I hope some psychologists are here. But if not, then some other comments or short questions to the... Well, comment. Thank you.
Concerning Norman Foster, he's and Rem Koolhaas is getting into restoration and retrofitting. And I think even the star architects are understanding that climate change is a fact. And to restore, rebuild is the future, because and that's the economy in architecture for the future. So we have had, Rem Koolhaas is completely changed his office, the projects in his office, and at one of the projects at the Europa Nostra Conservation Award, it was from Norman Foster's studio last year.
So you just have to give a few years to Norman Foster.
Well,
but he's quite old, so...
I'll believe it when I see it. He buggered up the British Museum. A lot of what he's done wrong never gets out in press because he has a lot of lawyers working for him.
It always helps.
Okay, these words. We go to lunch, and I think we have so nicely worked with the time schedule that we can start after lunch 1 o'clock.
Can I say applause for an absolutely wonderful chair who had to work with a lot of...
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.